Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Baalbek-Hermel in Lebanon. Baalbek-Hermel is named thusly because of the cities of Baalbek and Hermel there. Any other towns here are pretty much just farming communities because we are in the Bekaa Valley. You can see right here, Bekaa Valley. With this river flowing through with mountains on both sides, the Lebanon mountains and the anti-Lebanon mountains. Very appropriately named. And to be honest, that's about it for geography. We have this long border with Syria. And yeah, that's pretty much it for geography, to be honest. We've got the river, we've got the mountains, and we have the ancient towns, which the history of this area is going to be way longer than the geography of this area, because this is a very ancient site where people have lived for about the past 8,000 years or so in this spot. It would have been the Phoenicians that would have established the town of Baalbek, named thusly because it was where they had built a temple to their god Baal, or Baal, depending on your pronunciation. There were other gods that were worshipped there. There was Astarte, who was like one of the main goddesses of their religion, and also a god whose name I think is pronounced Adon, or maybe Adon, I'm not sure. But that's pretty much all that we know about the ancient history of this place. We don't have a lot of details until about the time that the Hellenistic culture entered via Alexander the Great. So that would have been in the 300s BCE. Once Greek culture came into this area, the Greeks were like, oh, so Baal is like your sun god, like an all-powerful god. So sun in Greek is Helio, right? Helios is the god that, drives the chariot, right? Or no, that's Apollo, right? Apollo has the chariot. But Helios is the sun god in Greek mythology. Let's put it that way. So they named the town Heliopolis, or the city of Helios. And the temples would become Greek temples, of course. That was during the Ptolemaic period, when this region was controlled by technically Egypt, but like I said, Greek culture. The Ptolemaic period of Egypt, which would later be replaced by the Seleucids. All of these empires, I suppose you would call them, kingdoms, were descendants from Alexander the Great's generals who divided up his conquered land and took it over. So the Seleucid was another one. My cat's crying outside. Ignore him. I have the door closed so he can't come in, and he's sad. So eventually the Seleucids, and they would be taken over by the Romans in the 60s BCE. I've seen a lot of different dates, but they're all in the 60s BCE. And this is when this town really started to thrive, because the Romans, I guess, really liked the temples here, and they beautified them and expanded them into the largest Roman temples outside of Rome. They split the temples between a few gods. The big important one, of course, is Jupiter, who is like the king of the gods in Roman mythology. There is another temple to Bacchus, who was the god of like wine and merriment. There was one to Venus, of course, the goddess of love, and another for Mercury, who probably would have been, it would have been Hermes in the Greek times, but I think the Helios aspect of religion turned into Mercury. There are also a lot of various other cults that sprung up here, so it was a major city of religion. And I'm not forgetting Hermel. The only really interesting historical fact came during the very early Roman times when they built the Hermel Pyramid. Now, it's not like when you think pyramid, you think Egypt, right? It's not really shaped like that. It is pointy on top, but it's very square. And it was used as a lookout post to see if any enemies were coming. But all of the major architectural wonders of this time happened down here in what was then called Heliopolis. And then Christianity comes along, right? Christians in this town at first were very heavily persecuted, but slowly but surely, now that the Roman Empire split and this region became part of the Byzantine Empire, and Christianity would become the official religion of the Byzantine Empire, it went very extreme in the opposite way. It became a town where people made fun of Christians, shoved them around, even, martyred them, to put it nicely. The tables turned. Right? It became the pagan religion. It had to go. It had to go. Most of the temples were demolished. There's parts of them that are still up, but for the most part they were flattened, and they even took parts of, I think, the Temple of Jupiter to build parts of the Hagia Sophia in what was then called Constantinople. Eventually, though, the Muslims would come storming in about 637. There's also some different dates for this, so it was in the 630s. Of course, we're in the CE because we're talking about the Islam, right? They would change the name back to Baalbek, which it's still called to this day. This region was a fierce battleground between the Muslim armies and the Byzantine Christians, and the Seljuks were the ones who won out in 1075, and it's been controlled by Muslims ever since. Although, of course, Lebanon very famously has a Christian population of Maronites, and also other Muslim groups as well, like the Druze. There's, from what I can tell, a somewhat even number of Sunni and Shia Muslims in Lebanon. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's probably more even than many other countries, right? If I'm remembering my research correctly. So it's not that it was, exclusively Muslim in Lebanon, because it certainly is not, especially today. But that's a whole other fish to fry. Don't worry about that just yet. The city was pillaged by Tamerlane in the year 1400 as he came invading through the land here. The Ottomans would officially take over the region by 1516, but they didn't really do much with this area. Mainly because it was, it was just farmland, and many of what was left of the temples were actually ruined not just during conflicts, but during earthquakes. The most major earthquakes occurred in 1158, in 1203, in 1664, and in 1759. Now there's fireworks outside. The Reno Rodeo is going on, and now they're doing fireworks. Let's wait for that to pass. I was listening last night for any rodeo sounds, and it was mainly just little bits of fireworks here and there, so I'm filming around fireworks sounds at the Reno Rodeo. But earthquakes, we were talking about earthquakes, very appropriately timed there with the fireworks going off. Major earthquakes. The 1759 one was the most prominent, I think. I think because it was probably the strongest, and also because Baalbek had drawn the attention of many Europeans by this point. About the 16th, 17th centuries, tourists started to come. This is when tourism became a thing, right? People were rich enough to be tourists, and they would come to see the old Roman ruins. So when it was damaged in that big earthquake in 1759, people really took attention and were like, well, we should really do something about these sites, because if we're not careful, there's going to be an even bigger earthquake and it's going to be gone, and we want to preserve it. Especially after Kaiser Wilhelm over in Germany came through the area on a royal tour and saw the sites, the ancient temples, and said, well, we need to preserve these and we need to research them, more excavations. And there was a big German excavation that occurred between 1898 and 1903. Of course, things are still going on to this day, but it was one of the most important periods of archaeology in the town here. There is, of course, other major news that didn't just affect the area, but Lebanon as a whole. For example, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Lebanon fell under the French mandate. They were controlled by France for quite a while. But I think the most important news that happened would have been in 2006 when Israel invaded Lebanon. Very short conflict back then. Issues with Hezbollah firing. I should back up. Hezbollah is a militant group / political party. At least in Lebanon, it's more political, but it's an anti-Israel group. And I believe they fired rockets over the border, and so Israel came in with force and invaded Lebanon until the United Nations, after 2 months, said knock it off. So during that time when Israel invaded Lebanon, they launched Operation Sharp and Smooth, which is who picks names of operations? Who decides? Because I've heard some strange ones. That's kind of high up in the strange list. I feel like I've heard stranger, but who's the one that picks the names of operations in military conflicts? I would like to know. And various drone strikes occurred here in Baalbek as they were looking for Hezbollah leaders and caused damage to the sites. Not significant damage, but damage enough that people were like, oh, you need to be more respectful. We get that you're invading. We get that you have an agenda. This is an important site. It needs to be preserved as much as possible. It's faced nothing but damage. And pretty much that's where we are today. There's a big tourist industry around here. We'll take a look at some of the sites that you can go and see today. It's pretty safe to do so, I would say. Other parts of Lebanon might be a little iffy, but I'd say Baalbek's pretty safe at this point in time. And I think we should actually, you know what I forgot? The UNESCO site. Of course, Baalbek is a UNESCO site. And I am kind of awkwardly perched here, but I had an idea. If I can prop up my tablet here, let's see if this will work. Forgot to read the UNESCO site once again. Let's see if this will work. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Baalbek, let's read it. It says, this Phoenician city, where a triad of deities was worshipped, was known as Heliopolis during the Hellenistic period. It retained its religious function during Roman times, when the sanctuary of Heliopolitan Jupiter attracted thousands of pilgrims. Baalbek, with its colossal structures, is one of the finest examples of Imperial Roman architecture at its apogee. And now let's take a look at the pictures, and then we'll head over to Google Earth. This is the very, very famous area here. I actually have a book of UNESCO sites by UNESCO, and that's there on the cover. There are these columns. Pretty much all that's mostly left standing from the Temple of Jupiter. There's walls and things, but that's definitely the most prominent part. You can see lots and lots of other details here. And so you can see why it's so important to protect these sites because it's crumbling. It's in a very seismically active place. It's in a part of the world that has been quite turbulent in the past and could very well be turbulent in the future. And places like this need to be very well protected. There's some sirens coming. I'm going to cut here and switch over to Google Earth and let those sirens pass. And we'll take a look at Baalbek on Google Earth. Those sirens were on for a long time. I hope everyone's okay over at the rodeo. I said, I think in yesterday's video, that I live close enough to the rodeo stadium that you can hear a lot happening over there. So, it's going on for a few days, so I just kind of have to live with it while I film. But here we are at Baalbek-Hermel Governorate. I'm going to zoom out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. So we are in a region known as the Levant, at least that's how you say it in American English, where we have Israel and the Palestinian territories. There's Syria. And this part of Turkey's part of the Levant as well. But it's mainly when people refer to the Levant, they mean the coast here, right? Mostly Lebanon, Israel, and Gaza, right? We hope Gaza's... We all know. And like Jordan and Syria is kind of thrown in there from that time. Parts of Sinai. But, yeah. You can see from above the mountain ranges here. This one's much, much greener because that's where we have the Lebanon cedars growing. Very, very famous trees. It's even on Lebanon's flag. There's still sirens going. But we're going to zoom on in here to Baalbek because like you can see, not really much happening here out in the countryside. Well, that side's kind of barren, but along the river, let me find a good spot. I guess that's it. We have a lot more farmland. Over here, you can see some good farmland there. But we're going to check out Baalbek. Here it is. So a couple of sites to see here. And what's really interesting, I realized the place we're going to next time also had this issue that very famous archaeological sites that just don't pop up on Google Earth. I have to switch it to view everything and then they appear. My goodness. So, before we head to the temples, I want to show you something kind of neat. It would be... Of course I can't find it. I always found it no problem before, and I rehearsed and found it no problem. There's my cat crying again. Here it is. A Roman quarry where we have what this site at least calls the world's biggest stone. So this was where the Romans would carve out rocks. You can see here along these hills, and here's a big column that clearly something was wrong with it. We saw something very similar in Aswan when we were over there. And there's just a big old rock that was left here. If you look it up online, you see lots of weird alien conspiracies. Just ignore those. It's the largest stone in the world. It's a carved pillar that got left here. There's quite a few of them in this area, but you can see how they dug down into the rocks here to make the pillars and just everything for their temples, right? Because they were made of stone. And so there that is. It is quite large. I don't think these pictures really do it justice. Like, that is really big, right? That is pretty big. Pretty big. And there's some more down over here. Here you can see another one. Just pillars that something happened while they were being constructed and they were abandoned. Hey, cat. There's also another site up here, which is really cool. So this was a quarry before the Roman times when it was the Phoenicians constructing temples to Baal. The Romans carved these big caves here to use as tombs. And now it's like a little auditorium. I guess it sounds really cool, I bet. The acoustics must be interesting, but yeah, the Romans dug in there to bury people. But this was one of the original Phoenician quarries. Looks really cool. There's a cool castle. I think that's neat. Oh wow, they're having a party in their fancy hats. But let's get to the big stuff. Let's look at the temples here. Let's just start with this slideshow. Baalbek Roman ruins. I think this is the Temple of Bacchus. I think you can see right here. I wonder if it's 3D. No, sadly, it's not a 3D area. But you can see the pillars there, the trilithon it's called. We'll take a look at that in a second. But it's still pretty magnificent, isn't it? There it is. Fantastic. I saw a video that showed, with like computer graphics, what this would have looked like in its heyday, and it was absolutely massive. Pretty artwork there, which you can see is, of course, has been damaged over time. But what we have, there's a little museum also nearby, but what we have left of it is still very, very remarkable. So pretty. So fascinating. Here's the trilithon. It's not it, but there's no pictures there of it, but you can even see it right there. The Temple of Jupiter. Yep, there it is. This was the big one, the largest Roman temple outside of Rome. Very important religious center, like it said, a pilgrimage site. People came from all over. Lots of interesting stories of various emperors who visited here to worship or seek advice from oracles. I think it was Trajan, I want to say. The stories that I believe was Trajan came to see the oracle here at Baalbek and handed the oracle an envelope and said, I need you to answer the question that's written inside this envelope. And the oracle said nothing and handed it back to the emperor. And as it turned out, there was nothing written in the envelope. Which is a cool story, I think. The ultimate story. Here's some of the wall that's left. Of course, there are many aspects of this city that are long gone. It's still honestly remarkable that we have what we have, right? Wow. But to be honest, that's pretty much it for the slideshow. Here at Baalbek. You turn off the everything. Other than that, it's just a regular town. There's lots of tourists. There's lots of hotels and little museum things. Mostly for the tourists to come by, but it's just a pretty regular town there. I guess we will head up to Hermel, if I can find it. It's disappeared on me. That's too far north, I think. Let's see. Oh no, I was too far south. We should look down here. Look how lush this farmland is here. At least while this the satellites were here, I guess. It was very green when they were taking pictures from up in space, wasn't it? There's a lavender farmhouse. Let's see if there's a slideshow. Let's see if there's oh my gosh. I love pictures of lavender growing in big long rows. Usually something you see in like France, right? By little lavender pouches, I love those. But here's Hermel, and let's see if I can find it. I think I have to turn on the everything again to find it. Yep, there it is. I scoured Hermel. There's nothing really interesting there either. So we're going to end the video here looking at the Pyramid of Hermel, which you can see is, when you think pyramid, this is not the shape you're thinking of, but technically it's a pyramid. It's a big watchtower. You can see from far, far away and see if there's any enemies approaching. But we're going to end the video here for tonight. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. And if you really enjoyed this video, you gotta subscribe now if you're not already, because next in my series we're heading over to Iraq. We're gonna look at Babylon. So if you liked hearing about Baalbek, oh boy, you're gonna love Babylon. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. Look at this old photograph, that's so cool. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night. Good night.